Welcome back. This is the 22nd segment in a series of 25 segments where we are exploring evil and suffering in bite-sized pieces. Now, approaching this examination, this exploration, from a biblical worldview, we have said that there are four historical events which create for us a template upon which we can build our biblical worldview. And they are creation, corruption, redemption, and restoration. And that from these four historical events, we can begin to get answers to four key questions that help us begin to get a grip and an understanding of the realities of evil and suffering. And those questions are, what do we know about God? What do we know about people? What do we know about God's purposes? And what do we know about the future? So, this second question, what do we know about people, begins to be answered as we look at this historical event of corruption. That human beings have become a corrupt people. I'm sorry, but we are not good. Whatever else Father Flanagan said that was correct when he said there is no such thing as a bad boy, he was dead wrong. There is no such thing as a good boy. I mean, this is why we talk about raising children. We don't have to teach them to be selfish. They already know that. We have to teach them how to not be selfish, how to overcome their selfishness. And once that lesson is learned, we have to reinforce that lesson within ourselves every day, probably more than once a day, for the rest of our lives. By the way, it has occurred to me that the reason that God, in his infinite wisdom, created babies to be small is because, can you imagine the damage that any one of them would do when they fling those tantrums that they fling if they were large? No, there's no such thing as a good boy. G.K. Chesterton, in his book Orthodoxy, wrote, "Original sin is the only part of Christian theology that can really be proved." So, documenting this, the Bible, which is the most realistic book ever written, says, all of us have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. There is no one who is righteous, no, not one. And all of us, like stupid, dumb sheep, have gone astray. We have each turned to our own way. And this is the root of the problem of evil and suffering. Evil and suffering come as a result of the fact that we are, in fact, a rebellious people. Each of us has turned our backs and rebelled against God's loving authority and his rightful claim on our lives. And as a result, we have evil and suffering. To the point that when the Bible talks about us, it says that because we did not see fit to acknowledge God, we instead did things that were not proper, that we are filled with all unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, evil. We're full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, malice. We are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, arrogant, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, without understanding, untrustworthy, unloving, unmerciful. And not only do we practice things that should never be done, we turn around and give hearty approval to others who do the same things. And that list, I did not make it up. You just go to the first chapter of Romans and there it is. So, the problem with the classic question, why do bad things happen to good people, is, I think, it's the wrong question. The better question is, why do good things happen to bad people? Now, is that all there is to the answer, what do we know about people? Well, thankfully, no. But it's extremely important that we have a good, solid grip and an understanding of this bad news about ourselves. If we're to fully appreciate the good news. And are you aware that the meaning of the word gospel is good news? And the good news is that God loves us so much that he is not willing to allow us to stay where we are unless we absolutely insist that we're going to stay there. And that will lead us into our third historical event, redemption, where the question, what do we know of God's purposes, will come into focus.